Hello and good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to the session on getting MSMEs back to business. We're very excited to have all of you here, and we have a number of panelists who will be joining us for the discussion. His Excellency Dr. Keze Pazu, Governor of Abia State. We have a representative from the Nigeria Export Promotion Council, Mr. William Ezeagu, the Director of Product Development, representing the CEO of the Nigerian Export Promotion Council. We have Ms. Saudat Salami, the CEO of Easy Shop, Easy Cook, as well as Ms. Christina Fernandez, the Vice President of the Global Entrepreneurship Network. And of course, myself, Nneka Eze, I am a partner at Dahlberg and the Director of our Nigeria business. And I'll be helping to facilitate the discussion today. I think a few points to open us up. One, of course, is that we know that in Nigeria, micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, really are the backbone of the economy. They're 77% of the workforce are employed by MSMEs, 50% of our GDP is really made up from MSME contributions. But at the same time, we know even prior to COVID, MSMEs particularly had a number of challenges that they faced. Everything from access to finance, access to electricity, access to networks and advice were of concern to MSMEs. And at the same time, what we've seen during the COVID pandemic, particularly during the lockdown period, is that MSMEs really struggled in terms of the ability to maintain their staff base. And so we've seen unemployment rate rise quite significantly. And one thing that came out from the Fate Foundation and budget report, which really struck me and has been seen through research Dahlberg has done, research that others have done, is this question of confidence. This question about are MSMEs, and particularly entrepreneurs, confident about their ability to start again, take risks, and really grow their businesses over time. Over the course of the session, we're going to talk through a little bit of what's happening both in Nigeria, as well as hear some international examples about what might work in terms of, as we're calling it, getting MSMEs back to business. And so we'll have each of the panelists talk about their experience and hopefully share some ideas, not just from their own work, but also from their experience across the country and globally. I would like to, great, okay, I see, thank you. There's in the chat, you can see there are a number of messages which will help to orient you to the discussion. And I think everyone has access to that chat box, so please feel free to drop some comments. And we can also put in some questions there or through the virtual platform as well. I think what we will do is we will start with a little bit of context setting. I would like the micro, small, medium business owner on the panel to really kick us off and share a bit about her business, and then we'll come back and talk to the other panelists as well. Mrs. Salami, can you share a little bit about, of course, your business, but talk us through some of the challenges in terms of setting up the business, as well as what your experience has been this year in the food industry.
Thank you, Nneka. Good afternoon, everybody. Your Excellency, good afternoon. Good morning, Paraguay, Christina. Oh, wow. I started my business years ago. The first idea came in 2001. I have a tech background. I'm a certified trainer and I build websites. So I just thought, okay, women had challenges in balancing work and home life. How can I use technology to solve that problem? And I looked at some of the challenges women were having in the home front that I could use, that could tech enable. And I just thought, okay, grocery delivery. And at the time in Nigeria, there was nothing like that. But I thought it was just building a website and just linking farmers to women. So it took me almost 4 years to realize that building a website was the simplest part of solving the problem. There was actually no infrastructure to support me. And because I was a pioneer at the time, so it was crazy. I mean, why would I go online to click and shop? and buy groceries. I knew that a lot of women said they had the problem, but we had this cultural issue, which was stopping them from using, a delivery service. Then, of course, me thinking that it was just a service, I soon realized that grocery delivery had a lot to do with the agri sector. The agri sector where we get the fresh groceries from. We have government supporting the agri sector in terms of production, but the other part of the supply chain there was no infrastructure. So we had a lot of waste going to buy things from the farm, going to deliver to homes, and I couldn't get money to do anything. And I was working from home as a side. I was still working, but I had this gig side business. So I was like, how am I going to scale this? Because I was going to scale waste. Access to capital was very, very difficult. Then I didn't have, in our days, our mothers started many businesses. They didn't go to business school. But I soon realized that 5 years just going back and forth and finding my way, someone just advised me to go for entrepreneurial training. And luckily, Faith Foundation was there at the time. So I went to Faith Foundation. They did not understand what it was for grocery delivery because there was no company doing anything like that in Nigeria at the time. But what they knew was that I was going to solve a problem and I was going to build a business. So I had to go through that training on building a business. So they just left me to, okay, I'm going to teach you how to build a business and solve a problem. Then you figure out your own business model, which helped me over the years. And that was what helped me. And but what happened, scaling the business, like I said, was difficult. It was more than technology. It was more than technology. There was no cold chain. There was no investment in infrastructure in the supply chain. I was scaling waste every day, getting anybody to even believe that you could run a business like that. Then of course, it's supposed to be a go online shop, but we had a culture that didn't trust. So you had people saying, you have to come to my house. I have to see you before I even go to your website to place an order. We had people being ashamed to actually use the service because it made them feel as if they were lazy. It wasn't something they could brag about. So we had a cultural issue to fight with. Then we also had issues with, building the business. I mean, even if I had put everything in place, I had a target market that were feeling, they were not happy about using it. They wanted a service, but they couldn't brag about it. So we had all those things to deal with, and it took me years. I don't even know why I was still here because everything frustrated me. We had government policies that were like, like they said in the early morning session, somersaulting policies. On my bus alone, one bus, I have like 17 licenses. For what? I have to buy a dustbin. Who buys dustbin every year? I have to buy one dustbin for each of my buses every single year. Believe it. Who buys dustbin every year? So we now have a civil service, the regulators, that their KPIs are the IGR, which means they're hoping I fail so that they can bill me. We need to change that mindset so that SME businesses can grow because they're waiting for me to fail in everything. So I don't even know all the licenses I actually need every year in running my business. I don't know the license. They just come in one day and say, oh, do you have this? I'm like, what was that? We need to start rewarding them with metrics. Ease of doing business has to give metrics for the local government and state government on how many businesses were you able to build at this time, not the IGR, because IGR is penalty. And they're hoping I fail, and which was disastrous for me. Every day I was struggling to build the business, but it was a service I built before the market came. I don't know how I was able to sustain myself, but I did.
Well, thank you for sharing. I mean, I think that is such a helpful story to hear, in part because we do know, you hear the challenges in the papers, if you will, but I think hearing it directly from an entrepreneur does help to put in context this question of, okay, what is the role of this, state and federal government in terms of supporting MSMEs? And as you were saying, this question about what are the KPIs to really support small business growth? Is it about growing the businesses? Is it about employment? Or how do we balance some of those IGR requirements, given the 50% contribution to GDP. And then also within your own business, the questions that were raised about access to financial services. How do you think about marketing, especially in a context where maybe word of mouth wasn't an option, even though it's quite well used in other contexts, as well as this question about infrastructure availability, whether that was about having cold storage infrastructure, road infrastructure, et cetera, that would help to grow and expand your business. So Cristina Fernandez works with the Global Entrepreneurship Network and does quite a bit of research on a range of different economies, looking at policy, the startup ecosystem, as well as institutional support to really unlock the MSME potential in different countries. Cristina, I would like if you can talk a little bit about the policies that you're seeing have been most effective in terms of supporting MSME development, as well as talking a little bit about mass entrepreneurship and models that you're seeing that really help us to achieve scale in terms of job creation from your global experience.
Yes, thank you for having me, and good afternoon to everyone in Nigeria. Over the past year, the main measures that we have seen around the world to support the micro, small, medium-sized enterprise sector has been on the liquidity front, ensuring that businesses were able to keep employees on payroll, ensuring that they were able to access loans, and that took a lot of work evangelizing among the banks and providing risk-sharing schemes so that even during the uncertainty of the pandemic, the financial institutions remained an actor in the ecosystem of support for the entrepreneurs. Now, looking ahead, the measures are encouraging what you well said is this resilience, and it became very apparent that capacity building is still a huge gap for entrepreneurs around the world in allowing them to become resourceful during times of crisis, and showing them ways and models for pivoting their businesses as necessary. And finally, I can mention also that that getting out of the way, much like Saudat Salami said, sometimes all that entrepreneurs require is for you to just, for government specifically, just not to make it even harder. So there are a lot of regulatory frameworks in place that are outdated, that exist from an area when digitalization was not as common as it is now, and the pandemic has forced many governments to make a serious commitment to modernizing the regulatory frameworks, so that these different licensing requirements, certain rules, certain categories of businesses that don't exist in registries start opening and giving breathing space to entrepreneurs that are surviving and being created during the crisis and taking advantage of opportunities.
Great, thank you for sharing some reflections in terms of what you've seen, particularly this year, as MSMEs are responding to the COVID pandemic, which is both, of course, the lockdowns, but also the global economic shifts and challenges. I think one thing that we have been hearing a lot about is this question about resilience during the pandemic period, but also this question of building back better has been discussed. Questions about capacity building, as you suggested, and then how can businesses actually pivot and take advantage of other opportunities that they're seeing in the market where maybe some parts of their businesses are being affected. And I liked that push in terms of government policy, not making it harder for businesses to, whether that's open, close, thrive, et cetera. Can you share any work that you're doing in terms of job creation, anything around mass entrepreneurship and models that you think might help to achieve job creation at scale based on the growth of MSMEs?
Yes, around the world for a while, many governments have been trying to target what they call high growth firms. And it's become apparent and very clear now that it's almost impossible to identify which are going to be the high growth firms, and that it is in the government's best interest to promote entrepreneurship widely and support the ecosystems that will support then the different profiles of entrepreneurs. The MSME sector is not a monolithic group, and so there are different support programs that are necessary. And then also it's now much more important that the support programs have very strong metrics and strong evaluation mechanisms, especially as governments now gear towards partnering more with private sector support organizations to deliver support for entrepreneurs.
Great. I think that's very helpful, particularly the questions around, how do you actually demonstrate that impact and growth? I think that links very well to Mrs. Salami's point around this question of, are the governments focused on the tax side? Are they focused on growing MSMEs? But how do you really measure, that potential of job creation within MSMEs? As you're making those investments. I think we'll come back to Ms. Salami, who I would love to just hear any reflections on what Ms. Fernandez has shared around the 2020 situation with COVID-19 and otherwise. I think in some of our work, we had suggested that some of the food businesses, depending on how the lockdown goes, might actually do well, if you will, during this pandemic as people, need to eat. Would love to hear how you've been able to either pivot or shift or continue to deliver during this period of time. What are the things that most supported you? And, did that include any kind of government support, or was that really through your own business network and strengths?
Fortunately, we were set up for moments like this, so we didn't have to pivot for anything. But unfortunately, like I said, we have supply chain challenges, the infrastructure. So we had food stock in the farm that could not get to the marketplace for us to get. We had no cold storage to move. So in other countries where there were online grocery companies were raising millions and millions of dollars, we didn't have that here, because most of that money would go to infrastructure, and a number of VCs are not ready to put money on infrastructure, and the government have not put this infrastructure in place. The technology in developed countries is fast moving because they already have an infrastructure that the technology is sitting on. But in Nigeria, the technology is not sitting on anything. So we now have, even look at the delivery infrastructure. All the delivery companies, they hardly have the equipment to deliver for us. It was just recently, we had a relationship with GoCarda, and I brought together some people in the online grocery space, and we had a meeting with GoCarda to tell them exactly how they can serve us, so that all of us would not be putting delivery infrastructure in place, because it's very, very expensive. So for us during the COVID period, it was good. We didn't have to fire anybody. It was actually a good time for us, but it was very stressful. We had to work half capacity, and a lot of our staff had to sleep in the office because we couldn't move. They were living very far away, and our drivers had to pick them to the office. There are a number of things, orders we couldn't take, because Nigerians, they eat a lot of imported items, and the imports were not coming in. Then the fresh produce that was available was also limited, because Lagos is not a full farming state. We really rely on things, fresh produce that come from outside Lagos, and so many of them could not come in. So these are the things, and the question, I've read a lot of, what would I call it, reports about what should happen after this. And everybody is so excited about how the growth of the online sector will be. But the government has not given us any intervention that I am aware of. What I have been doing in the last 3 years is, because now people are getting into this online space. I've had workshops, I've trained over 300 women to start businesses in the food sector and take them online. Because it's a whole different ballgame in opening a supermarket and having an online grocery space. It's whole different. And that training comes with 6 months mentorship. It's like a hand-holding for them. And it's very difficult when you shop online. You hear, if you hear all the conversations about buying online, you hear, this is what I ordered and this is what they delivered. And that's because we have no food safety enforced anywhere. no food safety standard anywhere. The GAP in the farm is not enforced. Good agri practice is not enforced. So we have a government that is funding production, but is not insisting on standards. This is the reason why we cannot export a lot of our fresh produce. So you have farmers growing because they have fertilizer and they have seeds. They don't have off-taker agreements. So everybody is growing the same thing because that's what the government is funding now. They have no off-taker agreement, so food is just getting rotten on the farm. So, and government is funding production, but government is not funding anything in the supply chain. Government is funding grains, further growing cassava. That's not the only thing we eat. So you now have people, a farmer, everybody is being encouraged to go to the farm, but there's no strategy around going to the farm. What should we be growing in the Southwest? What should we be growing in the North? What should we be growing in the Middle Belt so that we can trade? Not that everybody now, almost every state now is growing rice. What was that? You know, those are the things, the strategies, the things that affected us during that COVID period, which will have been a period for all of us to scale very well, like other countries have scaled. India scaled, UK, US, all of them scaled at this period. But we couldn't scale because there was no infrastructure in the supply chain for us to leverage on. So that we have to think about for moments like this that will happen. I hope we don't have any pandemic in the future. I don't know if I can say this is post-COVID. But we should be thinking about when we fund production, we should fund it till the end. You know, now there is 75 billion for youth, for farmers, and I read through all that. If for hectares of land, so when these youths collect this 75 billion and you're giving them 100 million to produce, who is going to offtake from them? Who is going to offtake? Where is the cold chain? Where are the pack houses? How is it going to get to the last mile? Where is the food safety standard they are going to enforce and the good and the agri practice they're going to enforce in the farm? So that all that 100 million you're giving to them, you're going to be sure that they'll return it to you. Because I guarantee you they will not. Because the shelf life of what most of our farmers grow is very short. Because there's no agri practice and most of their land is not irrigated. They depend on the rain. You know, so those are the things we need to look at, and that is how my own sector affects. Unfortunately, when I came into this sector, I thought I was coming as a tech person until I realized that grocery delivery is on the agri value chain. And so I had to join a number of agri groups and learn their terms and, you know, and understand them. Otherwise, I would not be successful.
Yeah. What you've shared, I think, is this question about how much does the entrepreneur have to take on in order to scale their business. So it sounds like you've had to, in a way, start to think about your backward supply chain linkages, your forward supply chain linkages, and really resolve a number of challenges within the supply chain. And then I think at the same time, you've done something which I don't know that every entrepreneur is doing, but it is quite admirable to see, is the fact that you've invested in training over 300 women to really enter into the space alongside you, sharing your experience in what sounds like an SME development program. We can discuss if you want to name it or not, but I do think it's quite impressive to see that scale that you've been able to reach, even with, as you were saying, a number of those challenges around things like food safety, around sort of financial investment and how that will grow. I think we have now.
Nika, may I just add a point, if I may?
Yeah, that's fine. And then we'll move over to His Excellency from Abia State is on the line. Please go ahead, Ms. Fernandez.
Yes, I just want to stress something so that we don't, so that we learn a lesson from what Sadat was saying. Promoting entrepreneurship is a systemic approach. You cannot have a standalone program and not take care of all the other challenges that come before and after. So in that sense, I encourage everyone to check out our latest report. It's called the Index of Dynamic Entrepreneurship, which we release every year, but this year has a special section on forward-looking scenarios to build and rebuild ecosystems in the medium term from that systemic approach. And we've consulted with several experts, including in Nigeria with the Faith Foundation through Adenike. And I think it will be useful for policymakers to learn about this approach of not just working on one specific program, but actually coordinating multiple actions across multiple agencies to really address the challenges. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fernandez, for sharing. I think sharing about the systemic investments that are really needed across and within value chains, rather than just focusing only on one stage, and would love to hear more about that research as it becomes available. Hopefully we can share it out with the participants. We'll move now to His Excellency from Abia State. I think one of the things we hear a lot about from Abia State is about the Made in Aba products really taking center stage, and then at the same time, a number of investments in terms of clusters, both from the federal government level, as well as from other actors, both private and social sector actors. At the same time, of course, we've had a moment in history, in a way, in Nigeria over the past 6 weeks with the End SARS protests, which did affect MSMEs in a lot of different ways. Would like to hear a bit more about the current situation in Abia State. What have the last 6 weeks been like in terms of the MSMEs? And I think, in a way, how does that compare to MSMEs in other locations? We obviously heard a lot about what happened in Lagos, but would love to hear about the situation in Abia State in terms of MSMEs over the past 6 weeks.
I want to say that the conversation we're holding, for me, is a very, very important input that can help us get our MSMEs back to business. Of course, you know that our people in Abia are known for small-scale manufacturing in all kinds of things, especially in the leather and garment subsector. There is yet another subsector that is not very popular, but happens to be the fulcrum or engine that drives all the other enterprises, and that is to fabricate things with metals. We have a cluster that deals with provision of spares for all kinds of equipment. There are issues, of course. There are 6 main issues from 2015 when we came on board. All these have remained with us up till today, and they got worse as a result of the COVID-19. They include access to finance. You see, I must acknowledge the effort of government, especially at the federal level, in trying to make available a basket of funds for MSMEs. But the funds that are provided have not taken into cognizance the capacity of the MSMEs to access these funds. Some of these MSMEs are not even officially mainstreamed in terms of being registered, and they feel that whenever government is calling upon them for partnership or to provide funds or whatever, that is an avenue to take their business away from them, quote unquote. So there is this lack of faith, lack of confidence, lack of buy-in, and they just sit by and watch. The other problem is that some of the enumerators that are sent to come and help the MSMEs in Abia to access these funds don't understand the business environment in Abia. They don't know where they are. They don't know who they are. The problem is that if somebody just fills something online, it is different from domesticating the process and procedure for assessment of these funds from home, because we know where the tailors are. We know where the shoemakers are. We know a shoemaker when we see one. We know a garment maker when we see one. Somebody cannot become a shoemaker overnight because there's fund now for shoemaking. So there's a whole lot of problem, a big gap between the announcement of earmarking of the fund, making the fund available, and actually getting the fund to the people that need it. The third issue about funding is monitoring and evaluation. If we don't get the parameters right, we will just be throwing money at people and then satisfying ourselves by saying, yes, we've given or provided this money. But the capacity of the individuals to turn the money around, use it for what it has been earmarked for, and then return it is an entirely different thing. And that is key because in Nigeria, people don't like to be monitored. And there is no free lunch anywhere, because if you are not monitored and the results are not coming, the policymakers cannot recalibrate and know whether to go forward or backward or stop or share. Our people are not yet competitive in.
Your Excellency, we're having some. All right, we're having some technical challenges with the line. We were just having some technical challenges with the line. You can proceed, please. Okay, thank you very much. So I was trying to go to the next point, which is market share. Our people are not competitive enough to find a space in the global market. Even in the African market is such an issue. They have remained within their traditional cocoon or silo, because some shoemakers in Aba are able to export their products to some West African countries and other parts of Africa. This has been going on for the past 20 years, but they have remained with these customers, and the habit is for them to write, give credit to other countries. They can write made in China, made in Italy, made in Turkey, for shoes that were produced right here. So they have some problem stepping up with markets and taking pride in what they have produced. I will come back to what we have done to try to reverse all of that. But before I do that, I would like to go to the next one, which is basic infrastructure. For the past 5.5 years, this government has been working on bringing Geometrics power online. Geometrics has generated enough power to serve the catchment Aba population and many parts of Abia, and has capacity to even provide the electricity demands of the Southeast. But Geometrics has remained the way it is because another person has license for distribution. So what do I do with the power that I have generated? It's very, very disheartening to acknowledge that we have light generated by Geometrics since 5 years, but cannot be evacuated because the EEDC wouldn't let Geometrics use the existing lines, and Geometrics has gone ahead to do their own line, but they will not be allowed to distribute even on their own independent line because the license for distribution was given to somebody else. So, and then if you cannot guarantee electricity, you can be sure of the unit cost of your products. And as I speak today, some machines and pieces of equipment for manufacturing are so sensitive that if NEPA goes off, that may be it for that month. That machine may need recalibration and all kinds of things to come on stream. And no medium scale enterprise can run on a generator 24 hours. So I think that we need to do something about that, and it's a low-hanging fruit that our policymakers must do something to make sure that Geometrics come back on stream to serve our people as quickly as possible. The third one is infrastructure generally, road, railway, and all of that. There is nowhere in the world where 95% of goods and services are conveyed by road. We must do something quickly to bring our railways on board. I am not interested in the standard gauge because I have 7 railway stations on the old gauge, narrow gauge.
I want to see the old narrow gauge back to life, and my government is prepared to collaborate with Nigerian Railways to make sure, because I'll be connecting 7 cities in Abia, connecting Port Harcourt, connecting Enugu, and going as far as Kano by rail. So as far as I'm concerned, we must do something about our transportation systems and ability to move the logistics around business. Makes it very, 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 very difficult for small businesses to thrive. I'll give you an example and then I'll go on to other things. In other places, if you ask somebody to supply you items from a place as far as Lagos, 1,200 kilometers away, that individual that is supplying tells you that by 3 p.m. on the dot, that you will have those goods by your doorstep. And if you come 5 minutes after 3 by your balcony, you will see the truck, right there. But here, we are expecting some container load of medical equipment that was cleared 5 days ago at Apapa. They are yet to leave the wharf. Assuming we had vaccines in the cold chain or we had things that we need to deal with. But so when is it going to come? We do not know. And that is the worst part of it.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We've heard quite a bit in terms of the investments that you're making in Abia State. I think one that really stood out for me was around the mapping of the value chain. So you actually know the different actors that are active in the clusters so that you can actually direct the support appropriately and direct the investments and the funds that you have available. You talked a lot about funding as well as this question about infrastructure that you're trying to invest in and develop. I think there are always going to be this question of is the federal policy or strategy in line with the subnational interests and perspective, particularly as you were saying around the power and some of the policies around that, as well as the rail infrastructure, where we have the older standard gauge rail, what happens as we try to move towards other types of rail systems in terms of reinvestment or having to move away. So thank you very much for sharing. We'll come back to you. I'm sure we have many questions here already coming to you. So we will come back to you shortly during the Q&A period. I did want to go to Mrs. Salami to share a little bit her perspective about how female entrepreneurs are accessing different funds available. Please share any perspectives, and then I'm going to start looking through the Q&A both from the Zoom as well as from the app as well.
Thank you, Nneka. Thank you, Excellency. I quite agree with what the Excellency said about the capacity of our SMEs to access these MSME funds. I have the same experience putting my mentees together. What I found out is that, the way our parents have done business in the past, they didn't formalize their business. Now it's different. A number of them are afraid to formalize their business. So one of the M&E for us in all the programs we do is how many people are able to register a business name, how many people are able to open a business account, and then how many people are able to get entrepreneurial training. Because although our workshop has a little bit of marketing, legal, and all those kind of things, it's not complete like what Faith Foundation and other foundations have. So what we need to do, if we really want to promote job creation, wealth creation, and all that, we need to promote entrepreneurship in our schools. From secondary school, high school to the university, entrepreneurship has to be a course because this is business. And the same thing to agric. A lot of the times we tell people to go and farm. Farming is a business. So you find so many people losing money. All their savings they've put into the farm, they don't understand how to turn that into a business. It's just to grow. Farming is not about just growing. It's about the business. And that has to do with some of the boys in Abia that are just selling to a cluster. If they had business training, if they had entrepreneurial training, they will understand what it is to run a business, how to market your business, how to network properly, how to put yourself into clusters and associations to access, to influence policies. And those are the things I found out with the women. Apart from that, what we found out that a lot of the women empowerment programs we have across, we do not take into cognizance the effect of that on the home, the effect on that on their husbands. So we found out that a number of women that we're trying to empower, at the end of the day, they end up not doing anything with the empowerment because their husbands at home are having this ego thing, so some of them will come back to me and say, I couldn't run that business again because my husband felt threatened. So a lot of the time when I'm running workshops, I bring a psychosocial, a psychiatrist and a psychosocial expert to come in to talk to the women about how being empowered is going to help you and your family. It's not something that when they empower you, you go in there and you start having this ego trip, then having a way to have the conversation with your husband so that your husband can come into your business. Because if you don't have a settled home, there's no way you can run a business properly. So we have to look at helping SMEs to get the right training to formalize their businesses, to also have the right mindset in running businesses. So many of them don't trust government in all the interventions that they have. That is right. But when it is time for them to put the books together to access those things, they don't even have records to show the sales they have in the month. So in my group, every month we challenge them. Every single month you will show your books on all your expenses, all your income. And we encourage them to make sure that all customers pay through their bank, their corporate account. They should get paid. These are the KPIs I spoke initially for local government and for states. These are the kind of metrics you should use to measure your local government, your civil servants. How many people in that group have been able to increase their turnover in your state? How many people have been able to employ more people? Now we have 25 million revenue. All those that are earning 25 million revenue, they are not going to be paying income tax. Yes, that is good, but we want to keep people in that 25 million gap? No, we need to look at how the local government can help all the MSMEs in that area that are in 25 million gap to increase their turnover. How many jobs have they been able to create, and what can we do as a state? How many, we incentivize people like Dangote and BUA and flour mills to build roads in exchange for tax. How are you going to incentivize me? How are you going to incentivize me to be able to as a small business so that I can get tax breaks for companies? I don't have to be making $1 billion or 10 billion every year before I can get tax breaks from government. This is how you promote MSMEs. And entrepreneurship is hard. We should stop telling people when they cannot get a job, they should go and set up a business. It is not easy to run a business. We need to talk about this. We need to look at those that are equipped and have the capacity to run a business and look at how they can scale that business to employ more people. Because if we employ more people, then they will not be out of a job. It's not everybody that can run a business. It is a skill. You can't just wake up and just say, oh, because I can't find a job, I'm going to run a business. Even when you go to, I remember almost all my entrepreneurial, my business school that I went, that some people were in my class, it's always a big class of 50. Looking back at it's not all of us that still went back and built our business. So many of us have gone back to employment. Some people are still at home. They don't know what to do with the training. So entrepreneurship is hard. Stop pushing people into it. You need to be able to strengthen those already in it and then let them expand.
Thank you, Mrs. Salami. I think a lot of really helpful points to what you were saying. I think one is this question about how can companies actually access the intervention funds available if they're not able to provide, for example, the books in a regular basis and be ready, as you were saying, for those opportunities. And then the other one, you're really talking about this question about what does mass entrepreneurship look like, which probably is not to say that 99% of MSMEs are micro businesses, rather than having a lot of individuals running very, very small subscale businesses. How do we actually identify those entrepreneurs who can build businesses at scale and employ many other people, given how difficult it is, how much investment is required in terms of entrepreneurship? So thank you very much for sharing, I think, both this question about how women and how businesses can access funds, but also how do we think about growing really larger scale entrepreneurial enterprises that can employ others. We're having a number of questions for now, two that are directed at Your Excellency. So one is really focused on some of what Mrs. Salemi was sharing earlier around investing in the agricultural value chain, really asking the question about how you're thinking about holistic investment for entrepreneurs in order to help tackle food security, including funding for the off-takers. So it's not so much a question so much as, you know, a concern about funding availability in terms of the agricultural value chain. The second question is around a number of the policy initiatives that you started to mention. The question is, what is Your Excellency doing to influence policy change, either through the legislative branch or perhaps through the Governor's Forum, in terms of unbundling power, in terms of the transportation infrastructure investments that you mentioned? Then I will pose some additional questions to Ms. Fernandez and Mrs. Salami, but the first one is around how do we invest more holistically in the agricultural value chain? And then the second question for Your Excellency is around how do you use your own platform to really advocate for some of this legislative change, which might be required around power, infrastructure, and rail?
Some of our experiences. Permit me
Sir, we're only just hearing you now, so you may need to just restart. You were on mute.
Am I on mute?
You're off of mute now, yes. You're fine now. Please proceed.
Okay. So I want to share one or two things that we have done in terms of MSMEs in Abia State. I had mentioned some of the issues that we encountered in 2015, power, automation, capacity building, market share, and then funding. We have sent 30 young people in the first instance to go to China to understudy how to use machines to manufacture shoes, because prior to this period, our people were still using scissors to cut leather. And they did so well that, in fact, 2 of those boys took away jobs of the Chinese on a part-time basis. They were so good that the Chinese engaged them to do extra hours. And we were so encouraged that we had to buy a complete shoe manufacturing line that is producing shoes today in Aba, ready for commissioning before the end of this year. And we have brought those 30 boys to become the first fruits and then train other Aba shoemakers on how to use those machines to manufacture shoes. At least we can speak to scaling, we can speak to consistent quality, we can speak to being sure of how many shoes we can produce per day, per week, per month, and so on and so forth. But the most important thing we have done is that we have changed their psyche. I have taken shoemakers and garment makers to 4 or 5 countries of the world, including a trade fair in New York. It was expensive for us in government, but we needed to put them side by side with other designers in the world so that they can see that these other people are just their contemporaries and they don't have 2 heads. So that has changed the Made in Aba psyche now. Everybody is proudly stamping Made in Aba on his shoes. And our effort was supported by Ford Foundation that gave us so many minutes on CNN, branding the Aba entrepreneurs as, you know. So having said that, we have also collaborated with government to do an area independent power plant, which is a gas-propelled power facility. But we are still having some issues getting our people to embrace the power plant that is in place. You see, they are still using their small generators to do. So we are going back to orientation, education, to make sure that they embrace what government is doing to support them and see how they can do better. But now let me go back to agriculture and value chain and the things we are doing about food security. Initially, we were thinking of doing an agro-processing platform that can have advantage of shared power, shared security, and all of those kind of things. But we had to do a rethink sometime last year, and we decided to do cottage industries in various local governments. We are starting with 7 as I speak with you. The equipment we imported came in from India, and the buildings are ready. We are beginning the process of installing those equipments, and we are focusing on cassava, we are focusing on rice, we are focusing on cocoa. The idea for cassava is to empower women, because in Abia, it is women that are involved in cassava cropping. And apart from giving them improved stems for greater yield, there is little or nothing you can teach the Abia woman about how to crop cassava. But it also has something to do with the youth, because they're going to get involved in the manufacturing of, in the processing of cassava to starch, and then selling the starch, pharmaceutical starch, to companies that manufacture drugs as raw material. So we are speaking to food security. We're also speaking to provision of raw materials for industries. So before the end of first quarter of next year, I'm sure that 7 local governments out of 17 will have one cottage industry or the other, depending on their area that they do well. Because cocoa, our cocoa belt is around Umuahia, but cassava is around the southern part of Abia. So depending on what a local government can do well, we have decided to do all of that. The other thing we need to talk about is that, yes, it's not been easy to get government at the federal level to tweak their mindset around those things that are on the exclusive list. I thank God for the establishment of Rural Agency for Rural Electrification. That was the arm that helped us deliver the Area Independent Power Plant. So going forward, we are looking at options around solar, which is very, very costly at the short run, but cheaper in the long run. But what I must say now, for all of us to hear, is that there is no country that can grow its MSME subsector unless we buy what we produce. We have become too sophisticated around the things we eat, the things we drink, the things we wear, that we are stifling our own companies. I remember that in 2015, when I came out with a policy that I must wear made in Aba dresses, I was telling them that I had to do this because I needed to acknowledge the hard work of my children. Because why would I not acknowledge all of us? If you go to our offices, you will see a birthday card from your 3 or 4 year old child scribbling something for mommy or for daddy. It may not look very beautiful, but you will be so proud that you will display it where everybody can see. That is the work of your boy or your girl. So can we take pride in patronizing our people? A population of 200 million people is a huge opportunity. What are we talking about manufacturing for America? Whereas we can manufacture for ourselves first. That was what India did. That was what China did. Anybody who wants Nigeria to buy should come here and manufacture. So we must look inwards and be the off-takers of the things we produce. We just can't be talking about it.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I think really helpful to hear the investments that you've made in terms of agriculture and what's coming in terms of the value chains you mentioned in terms of cassava, rice, and even into cocoa. Would love to hear your reflections as well around the policy question. So are you able to really, from a subnational perspective, affect federal policy and use the Governors Forum or other platforms to help affect legislative change around infrastructure, around the power access and the rail?
Oh yes, I have written severally to rail, for instance, to Nigeria Railway Corporation, and they are listening to me because I wanted a collaboration. Because going beyond the collaboration will entail affecting the budget and getting the National Assembly to do what they need to do, which is not an easy route. But I decided to say, well, I'm prepared to collaborate and procure the cabins and the coaches that we need, provided you will let me use the narrow gauge rail line. And the conversation is ongoing. I said earlier that such collaboration has yielded fruit in the establishment of the Area Independent Power Station that was commissioned by Mr. President a few years ago. But it's work in progress. There are so many things to be done, but I must say here that causing or catalyzing these changes in policy is not usually very easy, because my problem in Abia may not be the problem of my colleague in Zamfara. So getting us together in Governors Forum, and we're talking about how railway will favor Abia. They will say, oh, because you have more railway stations than anybody else, apart from Kaduna and all of that. So, but we'll keep pushing on. But I am saying that the main frame of our policy as a country should start from making it a policy that we patronize made in Nigeria. If you don't do it, it should be an offense.
Thank you very much. I think that push is so important, and hopefully other states can also learn from some of the model. We have a few different questions coming in, so we'll ask a few and try and direct them to the appropriate panelists, but to all the panelists, please feel free to add additional remarks afterwards. One question that came in is around women's empowerment. And I think there is a question about what other solutions might help. I think the commenter had said, you know, there may be other opportunities to really help to empower women, really understanding, you know, where they're coming from and what opportunities that there might be in terms of investing. And they also mentioned that this question about the household multiplier effect of investing in women is really not put into consideration as much when we're talking about MSMEs. So how can we actually invest even more into women entrepreneurs? Ms. Fernandez, I think the experience and the research that you have from Global Entrepreneurship Network may be helpful here. What are those examples you're seeing where we've actually seen investments into women entrepreneurs, whether that's alongside male entrepreneurs or just really focused on women that have been successful or that we can really learn from as we're thinking about different types of investments, whether that's from a government perspective or from a private perspective?
As entrepreneurs, the most successful work we've seen is around building networks. Their women support networks. Sadat mentioned, like, there was a training program, for example, but then there was no connection with the rest of the ecosystem. So again, if you promote women's entrepreneurship, you also have to promote it in the context of the wider ecosystem. It's good to have the support groups, the focused training for them, but then at some point you have to also connect those efforts with the larger strategy of building an entrepreneurial economy. What Sadat described earlier, for example, was a common example that we see around the world where women are trained to build their inner resilience and their business capabilities, but the rest of the culture is not ready to appreciate the resilience that women bring to founder teams, to investor teams, to even policy-making teams. In fact, it's very sad and discouraging when I see women's entrepreneurship programs being designed without a woman at the table. I mean, and even then, one woman might only bring her perspective. They're a very diverse group. Some have children, some have different types of, they face different types of barriers. So bringing women to the larger conversation about building an entrepreneurial economy, I think it is one of the most sort of common sense solutions that I've seen has worked to unlock more women-led businesses. And then the fact that we have to be very purposeful and intentional about having women represented in investor groups, for example. Some governments have gone as far as making it mandatory, and it has had effects in terms of the statistics. Women that sit in like mentorship boards or investment funds are more likely to invest in women-led businesses, not because of just an empathy issue, but because they are able to see the value that their diverse perspective brings to a business proposal, for example.
Thank you so much for those reflections. I think both this question about how do you build onto and grow women's networks, as well as the question about how do you ensure diverse representation and decision-making for different entrepreneurial initiatives and entrepreneurship investment initiatives. So I think that's really helpful to hear those reflections. One thing that we maybe haven't covered yet, and we do have a little bit of time remaining, is this question about competitiveness. And I think each of you have hinted at it, this question about how do we have a brand that makes sense, whether that's at the subnational and the state level, or it's for your own company. How do we actually compete in the market and grow businesses that are resilient to any kind of changes? We do have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement coming up. I think there's a big question about how Nigeria will be able to really compete with other markets, in part given how much we're actually importing. There's a question that came up that I think is really related to the free trade agreement that's coming up, and it says, one of the challenges that MSMEs are facing is ensuring that their products can compete locally and globally in terms of quality, sustainability, diversity, really meeting market demand, whether that's in Nigeria or in the international, regional and international markets. What are the things that we need to do to really ensure that level of quality and competitiveness? The question is really for all of the panelists, so I'll go through, perhaps starting with Mrs. Salami and then going to Your Excellency. For Your Excellency, the question is also hoping that you can give some advice, not just for Abia, but to other states who can build perhaps from that Abia example. So Mrs. Salami, any reflections in terms of how we're going to face this competitive environment that's already here and is even coming even more so with the free trade agreement?
It's all about standards. We have to enforce standards across the value chain, starting from the farm. I tell you, all our farmers do not, there are no enforced standard. Good agri practice is not in place anywhere. Everybody's just doing whatever they like. You go to an organic farm, they'll tell you that it's organic, and you see them mixing fertilizer with some things. There is nothing that is enforced. When the adulteration of palm oil, adulteration of even as little as locust beans, okpei, spices is done in the open. It's not hidden. It's done in the marketplace. It's done by middlemen, because there are no standards enforced. And that's why we cannot export. I don't know why, they've banned beans and so many things of Nigeria exporting, but we still eat it. Why is it okay for us not to be able to export beans, but it is okay for us to eat it? I just don't get that logic. So we need to enforce standards across everywhere if we want to compete in Africa, because Africa is not going to wait for us. They're not going to say, oh, because this is coming from Nigeria, oh, let it pass. Why should it pass? So from this, and for MSMEs, I think I know where the problem is, because they have to do everything by themselves. They have to provide almost everything. So it is easier for them to cut corners. There's no standard for the packaging material that we're using. There's no standard. So there's even no training. I talked about entrepreneurial training and business training. We have trained our people on how to make shoes. We have trained them on how to make hair. We have trained them on how to package. Have we trained them on how to run a business? Having a skill and running a business are two different things. If we want to compete internationally in Africa, we need to start training our people on business. We need to start enforcing standards everywhere, every corner, not just for our export, so that we're used to it. In food safety, all my courses for our women, because I focus on food sector, we always have a food safety class. We always have a food safety class. It is important for you. You cannot be running a food business and you actually do not have a food safety certification. Your premises does not have a food safety certification. Nobody is enforcing that except they want IGR, like the recent thing that happened in Abuja. It's all about the IGR. It's not about really why you need to be food safety certified, why your staff also need to know about food safety, because you are dealing with food. We need to look at this thing if we want to compete anywhere. Even why should we be eating? You go to the local market here, they are putting insecticide on smoked fish. They are putting kerosene or mixing it with oil and using it to coat our smoked fish in the open. We can't compete internationally like this. No, we can't. So we don't let fool ourselves. Forget whatever it is in the documentation we after and all that. If we do not enforce food safety standards across the value chain in every single sector, in packaging, in transportation, in the farms, there's no way we will compete. There is absolutely no way, because our product will not be able to match what the other countries are bringing in. That is the reason why we cannot really export. Look at Kenya. Kenya is exporting fresh produce all the time. That is because they have food safety standard directly from the farm. Their farms are irrigated. The seeds that they plant is also standard seeds. The method of planting is also you know, they follow everything. We don't do that here. Why? Why should we overlook that? Why?
Yeah. You've brought up some really great points in terms of this question on how can we actually start competing globally, particularly given some of these quality and sustainability questions. I think very much so. You know, when I lived in Kenya, I saw very much the examples that you're sharing in terms of really following those good agricultural practices and having even their own Kenya standard for local consumption, and investing in terms of training, and then of course investing across the supply chain. I think one of the questions that you've raised is how do we look at those same value chain investments that we need to make to support entrepreneurs? How do we do the same thing in terms of standards and quality? Whether that's, as you were saying, packaging, that's on the farm, that's, you know, in the processing facility, that's in the trucks, etc. So thank you very much for that feedback and reflections. Your Excellency, similar question to you. What are those types of investments that we would need to make, or that you're already making, to support quality and sustainability of companies? I think particularly in this context of the free trade agreement, how do you really ensure that Abia State can remain competitive, sustain its competitiveness and grow? And how can other states learn from, or maybe what's your advice for other states, you know, to do what Abia has done? Your Excellency, I'm going to unmute you. Just one moment. Okay, please go ahead. You're off of mute now.
I want to associate myself with the interventions made by Salami, and say that in Abia, we have a quality assurance agency headed by Barrister Sam Hart. But on a global scale, what I'm saying is that knowledge is important. Knowledge is the software, but the hardware is the laboratory. The difference between why our food items are not acceptable overseas and that of Ghana is acceptable is because they have a laboratory that we don't have. And this laboratory, I mean, $2-3 million to set it up. Just a laboratory that the World Standard Organization will know that once it passes through that laboratory, that is okay. So for all the steps from packaging, from the farm and everything, there is a hardware, and the hardware is the laboratories. We have not gotten to the point where individuals can set up these labs. So for me, I must say, and I'm sorry to say, I think NAFDAC is not doing what they are supposed to do, because most of the preparations, pharmaceutical preparations we see on the streets have NAFDAC numbers. Yet, NAFDAC number does not endorse efficacy. NAFDAC number on a label does not mean that that thing is efficacious, but they just give NAFDAC number because it's not a poison. But if a particular product is claiming to be efficacious against a certain ailment, and that is not true, that shouldn't get the endorsement of NAFDAC. So we need to take our checks and the things we do and standards seriously. And then everything cannot get to A standard from day one. Some products can be certified as being C or B standard, and they work towards being A. Once they become A, I mean, that is, you know, so, but if anybody is buying and knows that this is a B product from Nigeria, that should be good enough. And we have said this is a B product. So we must do something about our establishing those laboratories like yesterday. The agency for assurance that Sam Hart is heading in Abia State is doing what it can do, but we also need that laboratory that will test the glue that is being used for the shoes, the quality of the leather that is being used for the shoes, and the material that is used for the sole. of the shoe and inlay. So all of these things must be standardized before we can now say yes. But these are things that nations do, because as a subnational government, I don't know if we should begin to establish our own standard organization. So my recommendation is that, yes, every state government for all the products we produce must set up quality assurance boards, especially to make sure that the measures are good. If somebody is selling 1 liter, let it be 1 liter. If it is palm oil, let it be 1 liter of palm oil and not 1 liter of palm oil plus something else. But the standardization must come from a laboratory that is nationally accredited.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think really helpful to hear what investments you've made in Abia State and your advice to other states in terms of how to manage really the competitiveness question. We will be closing out in about 3-4 minutes time. So did want to just give space for any final remarks and reflections from the panelists in terms of final pushes either to other governments in terms of other states, in terms of entrepreneurs, in terms of policy. What's your one final thought? Maybe take 1 minute max to share a final thought. We can start with Your Excellency since you're already speaking, and then we'll go around to the panel.
Thank you very much. I want to ask and request that our entrepreneurs must embrace learning. They must embrace learning. They must enhance their skills, and they must embrace science and technology. But most importantly, they need to remain very, very resilient. There's a lot of hope. The fact that I belong to a country of 200 million persons gives me hope as an entrepreneur. What I do with it is another thing. But then to government, I want to say that we must find a way to handhold our small businesses. We must nurture and groom them. We must babysit them. We cannot allow them to the vagaries of the economic environment, because the economic environment elsewhere in the world is like swimming in a shark-infested water. Nobody is going to be merciful in any way. So government must handhold our entrepreneurs, and government must find a way to patronize made in Nigeria products. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, very much. Mrs. Salami, please.
For the government across, I would please beg them. It is important for them to put together a booklet for almost all the businesses that MSMEs are involved in, so that we can know all the licenses that we need to get every year. This is a lot of problem for us as businesses. People will knock on your door in June or April sometime and say, you have not paid this, you have not paid that. If I'm running a food business, what are the licenses I need? If I'm a plumber, if I'm a vulcanizer, if I'm a mechanic, what are the licenses I need every year? It should be published, it should be open, it should be on your website, let everybody know. And as for MSMEs, MSMEs is not, running a business right now is not like when our parents were doing it. We all need to take this seriously and get entrepreneurial training. There's Faith Foundation, there are many other organizations that are training you on how to run a business. The fact that you have a skill does not mean you can run a business. And owning your own business, a small business, is not, it doesn't mean that, it's the work, because a lot of motivational speakers always let us know that if we're working for someone that we have not achieved, that is wrong. We'll have an entrepreneurial mindset, but we can still be working for someone, and that business grows and you share in it. So we all need to have entrepreneurial training. We all need to now have entrepreneurial mindset. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Christina, Ms. Fernandez, before we come to you, we do have Mr. William Ezeagu from the Nigerian Export Promotion Council representing Mr. Awolowo. Can we please have a quick 30-second feedback and remark in terms of Export Promotion Council support to MSMEs?
Thank you, Ma. I wish to appreciate you for this intervention. Sorry for the delay. But I want to say at Nigerian Export Promotion Council, we have done so much. Actually, SME is it's in our heart, in our doing things. I want to say that I would just summarize in three. For one is to develop. We develop them through what we call zero to export, program, whereby we train those people who have not known about export on export. We also do what we call the export clinic, where we train SMEs on how to go into export. More importantly, we trained, I hear the excellency talking about quality and standard, and which other speaker also mentioned. I want to say that we are the champion of SME going for certification. NAFDAC and so on is good certification, but they cannot take international market. So we're talking of HSCC, we are talking ISO 9001, we are talking about Global Gap, we are talking about BRC. These are international standards benchmark against SMEs. And that is what we are doing, supporting SMEs right now to do it. We are doing that in collaboration with development agencies. We are doing that on our own because we believe that without certification, you cannot access the market. We also do what we call export warehouse, whereby we are reducing the constraint of exporters from the challenges faced at the port. We say, no, everybody don't have to go to Apapa to start export. You can start from the warehouse where you are, whether you in Sokoto, whether you're in Benin, it's done there, including inspection, including every certification. Then when you move to the port, it goes straight to the ship. There are a lot of things we are doing, but just because of question of time, I want to say, look, we are here for you at Nigeria Export Promotion Council. Please, I want to thank you and say we appreciate you. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ezeagu. I think very helpful to hear some of the interventions that NEPC is really investing in, and hopefully some additional support that will come to MSMEs, particularly in the context of the free trade agreement. We'll go finally to Ms. Fernandez for final remarks, and then we'll close out with apologies for the slight delay to go right after the hour.
Thank you, and just very briefly, what I heard about the challenges is not just common in Nigeria, it happens around the world, and what we have seen work is collaboration. Sometimes in some countries, the entrepreneur is still seen as an individualistic person, as an individualistic behavior, but in reality, the success of entrepreneurship is built around collaboration. So I encourage Nigerian entrepreneurs to unite, to make their voice heard, to His Excellency, Sir Ezeagu, and others who are obviously here because they are open to listening to what their struggles are, and to collaborate, to improve and become proud Nigerian entrepreneurs. And finally, to connect to the global ecosystem. And with that, we offer the Global Entrepreneurship Network to do that, because entrepreneurs from across borders are willing to collaborate more so than ever in this post-pandemic world. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Ms. Fernandez, both for your reflections and participation. Thank you to all of the panelists, Your Excellency, Mr. Ezeagu, Mrs. Salami as well. I think we've had quite a rich conversation in terms of, one, what is needed in terms of Nigeria's growth that might be backed by MSMEs. I think there was a strong push to mass entrepreneurship and really ensuring that entrepreneurs have the training and ability to really become entrepreneurs, given how difficult it is. There was a push on standards and this question about what can be done at the subnational level, given some gaps that are being seen in terms of the federal, as well as a push to really understand what are the regulations that my business might be actually facing. Is there a way to either standardize that or have it very clearly documented so that there's no opportunities between, IGR and regulation? And I think a very interesting push from Ms. Fernandez around collaboration and really thinking about what are the ways that businesses can really come together. We saw a great example of this from Mrs. Salami in terms of her support to over 300 women entrepreneurs. I think we're hopefully going to see many more examples of that. Thank you all for participating. To the panelists, if we can stay for a photo, I believe that will be the final thing that we'll do. If we can stay on the line just for a photo opportunity. Thank you to everyone else, and we'll be closing out the panel session now. So I think just look at the camera and we'll take a few screenshots to have for perpetuity. Great. NES team, please let us know when you're okay. All right, we're good to go. Thank you all so much for joining us for the conversation in this virtual format. Please have a wonderful afternoon, and we hope you'll join us for the rest of the sessions during NES. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
All right, take care. Thank you.